Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of Allah, the most merciful, the most compassionate. My dear audience, this is Mamdouh Mohamed again, talking about the main topic of this series, which is our children at schools. The question is, all of us have children who study at schools, but really, if we don't have standards, if we don't have criteria to judge this school, it becomes difficult for us. And I think that all of us need to visit the schools, to read their brochures, to have relationship with them. A couple of visits or 3 visits or more or less would make the parent aware of what the school does. And at that time would be able to decide, will I put my child in this school, or will I select another school for him or for her? This is a very important decision, and I think the more equipped we are to judge a school, the more better future for students, inshallah, and for our kids. For example, when we visit a school, when we see a school, and we are acquainted, or we can visit a couple of classes and see the teaching and see where the skills is. For example, in some schools, they don't make balance between knowledge and skills. You'd find some schools, mainly they focus on knowledge, on knowledge, on knowledge, and this would be at the expense of the skills. And there should be balance between this. For example, to give you an example of a grammar lesson, when the teacher would focus on the grammatical rule, and the students would be able to memorize the grammatical rule and explain it very well. But at the same time, when they practice the language, when they write the language, when they say speak the language, you find that they are making a lot of mistakes because of the lack of application of the grammatical rules that they already studied. And this is something that we don't want to see. We need to see a fair balance between knowing the grammatical rule, because this is the thing that is going to govern and control our speech, but most importantly, having a fair amount of practice of the application of this rule in different contexts, in sentences, in our speeches, in writing. And the more practice we will have, definitely the better here, because the outcome of knowing the rule is that you practice it very well. So when you visit a school, pay attention to this. For example, we teachers should ask ourselves to learn and benefit from this as well. Am I giving a fair balance between the two? If the rule is understood in 2, 3, 4, 10 minutes, I would spend the rest of the time definitely allowing the students to practice this in reality, in their conversation, in their speeches, in their writing, to guarantee that there is a transition from the theoretical knowledge of knowing the grammatical rule to the application, the real application of this rule in our speaking and in our writing. The teachers and the parents should see what does the school do, and even by looking at the textbook, you can see where the focus is. This is something we as teachers, we as leadership of the schools, or we as parents would look into it when we see the textbook of our children and when we see some practices of the teachers inside the classroom. Another thing that we need to focus on is, do the students have the experience of full immersion in the language, or just they study it from textbooks, not from real life situation? If we're practice the language in a made-up situation, not realistic situation, we're studying a lesson about going to a restaurant, but in reality, we don't have some practice to go and ask and read the menu and practice it in reality. It's not just reading the text and trying to acting it. A teacher, a wise teacher, definitely will arrange for a couple or 3 visits to these places after preparing them for the children to have the opportunity of living the language in order to be a step to emerge into the language. And this cannot be done just inside the classroom unless the teacher would equip the classroom with the necessary objects that are needed for the lesson so that students would have an opportunity to practice the language in real life situation. The students need to emerge in the language, to live the language, not just read it from books or to do it theoretically. This is a factor that even an average parent who doesn't have background about this can see. When he enters the classroom, he would notice that whether the teacher brings objects, whether there are a lot of resources that are used by the school to help the students emerge in learning the language, or there's lack of resources and lack of opportunities. Also, the final application of this can be done, for example, by a teacher taking the students to one of the near restaurants, and they will be exposed to reading the menu and make orders from the menu, and then to live the language, to emerge into the language, to practice it as if it is part of their daily life. I hope this is understood, and sometimes we see some glimpse of it, but not a continuous practice in schools. There are other things that we can see when we read the textbooks of the students. Do we see gradual transition or just shifts, big shifts and big gaps between a lesson and another? This is easy to observe by seeing the degree of difficulty of these lessons. Another thing in this gradual transition, you can see it, of course, in the reading text and the actual reading of the students. You can observe it in the difficulty that you find in the textbook. You can see it from many perspectives. For example, you would see a lot of repetitiveness in many books. You would see, for example, the Al-Shamsiyya and Al-Qamariyya may be taught in grade 2, then it will be taught in grade 4, and so on and so forth. And this is a lot of repetitiveness, and it is at the expense of the time, the learning time of the students. You don't see the gradual transition. And here, the teacher, the smart teacher, the teacher who has an expertise in this area, he would know when to skip some pages or some lessons in the book, or when to give them a secondary importance or a secondary focus, and when to give them a primary focus, when to not to be fully controlled by the textbook. We want the teachers to be the masters of the textbooks rather than the textbooks having full control over the teachers. It is a common practice among some teachers who don't have the expertise would tell you this answer: what can I do? The textbooks want me to do that. It's not true. You are the master of the situation. You should know that the textbook is only one part of the curriculum. The curriculum is much more wider than the textbook, and you are the one who selects the pieces and puts the pieces together in order to achieve the objectives and the goals that you want to achieve. So notice that, read the book with this intention in the beginning, and to see if there's gradual transition or there are some gaps. This is something common in different books, in whatever subject you may think of, and I think smart teachers, by doing some effort outside the classroom and by having close observation for the students, he would discover whether there's gradual transition or not. Even a parent, he would see this when he or she looks at the textbook that the students have. One of the most important practices that we expect to see the teachers doing in their classroom is tracking the students' progress. The minimum requirement from an average teacher that he or she would have a record of tracking. Should track the assignments and we should grade them and would give them grades and would track the students to know where the students is going. Does the grade of the students is increasing or does it decreasing? And I think it is a good time for us now to take a break and we will come back. And this is your presenter, Dr. Mamdouh Mohamed. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. This is Mamdouh Mohamed again, and welcome back to this episode that talks about the progress and the tracking of the students. This is how you can see the quality of the school before you select it and put your child in it. This is how the school itself and the teachers themselves can see the progress of the school. The last thing that I was talking about was tracking the students' progress. Most of the teachers would only confine themselves to just correcting the assignments of the students. And this is not what we mean by tracking the students' progress. We want them to mark if the students, for example, became able to say the alphabet correctly. We would mark this, and writing some notes that still there's a difficulty in these sounds or these letters in the pronunciation or in the dictation or the application of the grammatical rule for the students. And when after some time it changes, there should be a written note about that. This is what we mean by keeping the tracking the students' progress or the students' attainment. I think it is something essential, and from the records of achievements of the students, we can see the quality of tracking at this school. This is very important to know where are the ups and downs and what are the specific areas for improvement for our children. It is the role of the school, and you need to keep an eye on this. And when you see that at this time the student changed and he no longer has a problem in this grammatical issue or in the spelling of the words or whatever aspect that the parent want to see the progress of their children in that. Another thing is that you need to know if the school provides help for the students who need that. And I may talk a lot about this when I talk about differentiation. The natural picture of any school or any class is that the bell shape, the shape of the bell, that the majority of the students, perhaps 80% of the students, are in the middle average. And there is 10% in the lower level and 10% in the upper end. I would say 10% here, 10% here, and 80% in the middle. This is an average image or average situation of any classroom. And what we care here is, does the school provide help for the student who need this help? And usually they are the ones who are in the lower end. This 10% of the students, it's either we give them help by having extra lessons for them, or by even when they are in our class, we pay special attention and extra attention to them than the attention we gave to the average students. And at the same time, the help also is needed to be given to those students on the high end, simply because if we don't give them the proper attention, what happens is that you do not progress at the level of their smartness or intelligence or their capacity. We are hindering their capacity from growing. This is something very important, because we need to give those people the rights that to develop themselves more because they are smarter than others. And I think it is the right also of those students to get proper attention to raise them at least to the level of the average students in the classroom. This is something that, what type of help does the school provide? Does it have extra period? Does it have teacher assistant in the classroom that would help pay attention to those students? Does the teacher differentiate between the assignments and the activities and the tasks and the homeworks that are given to students based on their standards and based on their academic achievement? This is something that a parent would pay attention to. This is something that the teachers should be trained to do. And I'm quite sure that the leadership of the schools nowadays pay a lot of attention to this issue in order to give every student his rights, his due rights. And this is one of the principles of Islam. The Prophet ﷺ said, أعطي كل ذي حق حقه. Give each one his due or her due rights. Each one has his own rights upon you. And this is the rights of the students upon the school. And I'm quite sure that schools now witness a lot of changes in them in order to achieve this feature. One of the things that a parent would look into is the intensity of the exercises in the books, for example, especially when we talk about learning a language. Learning a language, all languages require a lot of exercises in order to foster, or in order to encourage, or in order to strengthen the skill that the students is acquiring. For example, without a lot of exercises of reading, the students would be handicapped in this area. That's why there should be some exercises, not necessarily to be in the textbook. It can be in the software. It can be that the teacher himself or herself does them and create something extra to the textbooks. We would never find a model textbook in the whole world. It's always there's something better than what is available. And here is the role of the teacher by adding extra material from here or there, and by preparing extra materials, we will find that we will be benefiting the students by having the exercises, and how intense they are, and how varied they are, and how gradual they are. The changes and the varieties of exercises is something very essential in language learning. So I'm quite sure that the parents would pay attention to that if they have the basic background of judging a textbook or judging a classroom, by seeing that how many exercises does the teacher do in the class, or by observing the quality of exercises in the textbooks. This is something very important for the progress of the children. Also, another feature is the analysis of results. For example, an average classroom or an average teacher would mark and give grades for the student. But it doesn't show that when the second month does the same thing, the third month does the same thing. It doesn't give the full picture by analyzing the results. For example, if we analyze the results, a teacher would see that the students in grade 1, they're progressing at the rate of such and such, but when they came to grade 2, their progress slowed down and their grades became a little bit less than what they have done in grade 1. And when this happens, the teacher in the school to sit down and to see and to analyze this data and to look for the reasons of why these results changed. This is a very important, healthy feature for the school, healthy feature for the teacher, when he or she or the whole school starts looking at the whole picture of the classroom or the whole picture of a specific subject, and to see the progress of the students, or to see their attainment, or to see even their behavior, how it improves, or how it remains still, or how it goes down. For example, you may notice that students' values and students' code of ethics, usually it's going up in the primary stage, when it comes to a specific age of the students in early secondary or in the middle school, we will find that it fluctuates because of the nature of the students, of nature of development of the students at that time. Anyway, analyzing the results is an important job for school leadership and for the teachers, and parents should pay attention to this aspect. This is the point that I was referring to, and perhaps I would make a whole episode about this concept of differentiations. Does the school make differentiation? Does the school give every student his rights according to his level? And we can deduce this from the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that says, أَعْطِ كُلَّ ذِي حَقٍّ حَقَّهُ. Give each one his due rights. The right of a low achiever is to get more attention from the teacher in particular and from the school in general. The right of a high attainer student is the same. He needs more attention because he progresses at a rate that's a little bit quicker than the average rate of the other students, so he needs special attention in order to develop himself. And this group is where we can get leaders for the community and leaders for the society and leaders for the world if we pay and if we give them their due rights and the special attention for them. I hope in one of the coming episodes I will pay special attention to this to elaborate more in it, because it is a very important feature of good schools that they make differentiation between students according to their levels and according to their attainments and according to their progress. You can contact me to get more information by email Mamdouh, M-A-M-D-O-U-H, 2000s @hotmail.com. This is your presenter, Dr. Mamdouh Mohamed. I hope to see you in the coming episodes, and I hope you benefit from this experience. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Wa akhiru da'wana an alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.